Hello everybody, it's Flash Hazardous, and today we will be doing a update 1 Intel patch review. It's patch day! Well, by the time you watch this, it's actually going to be the day after patch day. So I thought I'd do a video discussing the latest patch for Synthetik, as I think they've done a heck of a lot of good things, and I thought we could work through it together. So without any delay, let's kick it off. So what I've got here is the patch notes Steam page, and we're going to work through it line by line. So before we get to that, the main things on the new patch is a new Recon class with 3 variants. The Recon itself, a Psi Recon, and an anti-material Recon. We'll discuss those a little bit later. But for now, I can tell you that the new class plays very well. Some very interesting mechanics in terms of longer distance, weak point damage, and critical hits. I mean, let's not spoil that. We'll get down to that a bit later. There's also 2 new weapons that I haven't seen yet, but any weapon variation is good. They talk about many improvements, tons of fixes, and more, and that's what we have here, which is the patch notes line by line. So let's get started with that. Now, before we do begin, I've got to say something about Flow Fire games and the release of Synthetik 2. When I first looked at this game, and I really did get it on a whim. I bought it on a whim on day 1, and I played a couple of times, and I've got to say, the day 1 EA release was not very good. I was actually prepping my video for the first impressions, and then they dropped the day 1 patch. And this changed so many things for the better. A lot of minor improvements, major improvements, things like the speed of the character, the way interactions work, like just basic stuff that made the day 1 patch head and shoulders above what the original game was on EA. And that actually forced me to redo my early impressions video, because it was originally going to be quite scathing. But with the day 1 patch, I thought they had made a massive leap in the right direction. Now, post update 1, the Intel patch, as they call it, this game is looking great. They've done some fundamental changes that just speed up the flow of the game and make it far more exciting to play on a minute-by-minute, run-by-run basis. Okay? So let's go into that and why I think that's the case. So first off, under gameplay, they've further increased movement speed, and most of the maps have spawn points adjusted to remove boring or dragged out areas of gameplay. Now, this is why, these 2 lines alone is why I dubbed this patch the speed, violence, and momentum patch. And that is because what they have done is they've increased the flow rate of the game. As you progress through a stage, it feels a lot faster, it feels a lot snappier. You're fighting a lot more enemies, which is what they mean over here by most maps having their spawn points adjusted, or at least that's my impression of it. If I'm wrong on here, please do counter me on it, but the feel of the game is much better. The speed is faster, more enemies to fight, less downtime, and for a game like this, it is just about reaching a really good middle point where it needs to be, right? This game is never going to be a complete run and gun, encounter to encounter. There's a little bit more slower, deliberate, I'd say tactical, even though I call it tactical play. The idea being that you can't just run and gun because of things like the slow reload mechanism, because of the things like the bloom on firing shots and like the emphasis on headshots. But they've taken it about as far to the right as possible, and by that I mean the speed and flow of the game is just in such a good place at the moment, and I'm really enjoying that. Some of the things they've done, they've added new map variations and visibility improvements. I haven't seen the visibility improvements yet. I might have missed it as I was playing through the Recon run a bit earlier. But new map variations are always going to be welcome. What this does point to me is that I don't know whether Flow Fire games will ever get to a point where they implement procedurally generated maps. Shrike, if you do watch this, it would be really interesting to know, are you guys headed towards some form of procedural generation on maps, or will it always be handcrafted? Anyway, no matter that, new map variations are always going to be good and adds more variety to the game, so I'm happy about that. Loot has further been tweaked. Can't say much about that. This is an ongoing process. Keep telling us how you feel on these topics and point out the weak areas so that we can improve on them. All right, and I think just in that top gameplay line, I think that's, to me, is one of the most positive changes of this patch. As I said, this is the speed, violence, and momentum patch. Much more action-packed, a lot more fun. It's where Synthetik 2 needs to be in terms of its pacing and flow. Onto mechanics, and I absolutely love this change. So one of my biggest gripes from the first impressions video was this need to press the reload button multiple times. So you'd have to, in order to reload your magazine, you would have to first press a button to eject the magazine, then press a button to put a new magazine in, and then there was an active reload or a skill check within that where you could press the reload button again to hit the perfect reload so that you reload faster, right? To me, in the previous iteration of how ejecting the magazine worked, there was absolutely no reason to have an additional button click for ejecting the magazine, because there would be no scenario or mechanic where you would actually have to eject the magazine and then wait to reload. So my thoughts were, why not just incorporate the two buttons together, make it eject the magazine and reload on one button press, and then have the active reload come after that? Well, now what they've done is actually introduce a mechanic for ejecting the magazine. And this is great. This is great, because now it gives a reason for ejecting the magazine and waiting before you reload. So what's the change? Well, first of all, there's a 10% speed bonus for 1 second. That's nice. Always nice. Any small modifiers during what is a particularly vulnerable state, when you're ejecting the magazine, you're typically running back, kiting an enemy. It's good to have a little bit of extra speed bonus to get away. That's great. Very small, but I like it. But this is where the big change is. Ejecting the magazine now increases cooling by 50% as long as the magazine is out. Now, cooling and heat, as far as I understand, is something that they added in this patch. So now there's an incentive for you to eject the magazine and wait while your weapon cools down at the increased rate before you put the new magazine in. That legitimizes the need for a button to eject the magazine. That's great. Now, the question here to me is this 50% cooling ever going to be meaningful in terms of gameplay? Is it just that while I reload a gun that's already on high heat, naturally, as I'm reloading, the heat will go down fast enough for me to have to just be able to use it again right off the bat? Or is this 50% increase in cooling actually going to make a tangible difference? Are weapons going to have a long cooldown time without you, if you were not to use this new mechanic of waiting before you reload so that the cooling goes down faster? That's going to be a big question. I'm interested to see how that's going to work out. If that's the case for some weapons, maybe you have some very high heat generating weapons, this is going to be an absolutely great change. And I love it because it legitimizes the mechanic of ejecting the magazine. Great work, guys. You've taken a mechanic, at least, I don't know what it was like in Synthetik 1, but you've taken a mechanic that was absolutely useful, or a button press that was useless, and made it useful by including a mechanic in there. Okay? Then they said varied grenades have been changed to a much more convenient cursor target. I haven't seen that, but anything that, well, I guess is positive. I don't know. So I'll leave that one out. I won't comment on it. Next one's interesting is knockback. They've added the knockback mechanic. So I wasn't aware that it wasn't in effect, but it looks like the knockback mechanic wasn't in effect. And what that actually means is that certain types of items will now knock back when you use them. And I'll use this example here. The non-lethal shot is something that previously I believe did not work, or at least the knockback didn't work. It says now that it slows and knocks targets back. It still says work in progress, but I'm assuming by the fact that they're saying that the knockback mechanic is now included, items like this are going to be more useful. Knockback will be a very useful effect in this game in general, especially when it comes to melee enemies who charge you down. You want something to knock them back and be able to essentially create some breathing room so that you can get away from the encounter. So that's really good. They say, keep in mind this will only be for single player due to technical reasons. Okay, fair enough. Let's move on to classes. Right, now, here is the meat and potatoes of the update. They've included one new class in the Recon and essentially 3 different variants of the Recon class. So, as they say, Recon is essentially a new sniper class, offers 3 fully fledged different specializations. You should also not look at him directly in the eyes. And I think really here, what Flow Fire Games is telling us is just how to practice safe etiquette at the gym, right? We all know at the gym, you never make eye contact, so you can avoid really awkward situations like this, especially when someone is on the leg crunch machine or whatever that this is called. Never make eye contact. And I think what our bros over at Flow Fire Games are doing is just reminding us, don't forget about proper gym etiquette when you're out there. Don't look at someone directly in the eyes, whether they're the new Recon character or not. With that slightly awkward segue, why don't we take a look at the new classes? So I'm going to transition over to the game here. I jump into Synthetik really quickly. And if we take a look at the class itself, so I've unlocked the other 2 classes just so I can show you guys how this operates. So for the base Recon class, you've got a dodge roll on a very low cooldown. It gives you higher dodge chance, or 100% dodge chance. So obviously you're not going to get hit while you're doing it. It adds a speed boost. So this is your getaway ability. It's on an incredibly low cooldown at 5 seconds, I'm assuming, 5 ticks, whatever that is over there. Then you've got the L24 Eraser. I found this to be a very useful crowd control item. The idea is that you can almost append or add a laser effect to your next shot. And this has a high chance to bounce. It can bounce off multiple targets. It says that it does multiply the damage as it bounces. So the idea is you run into a big group of enemies. The ricochet is going to hit a number of enemies. And obviously, as you apply the L24 Eraser, you apply the laser onto it, and it ends up annihilating a whole bunch of enemies. Really nice ability. Is on a very short cooldown. I believe you can hold multiple charges as well. Flash Grenade's very interesting. Very nice ability just to stop yourself from being overwhelmed. So if you're ever faced with a ton of enemies coming towards you, you throw the Flash Grenade, it blinds and disorients, reduces their fire rate and their speed, increases their recoil loss 6 seconds. A nice little ability so that you can kind of get around, keep getting your headshots, keep getting your weak point damage on, and maybe face a bit more or a bit less of an onslaught from the opponent while you're doing that. And then finally, it's weak point scan. Again, this draws to the strengths of the class. It's an ability that scans an area, and around that area, so it scans an area, any enemies in that area, you will increase the critical hit chance on those enemies, and you'll increase the weak point damage. This also affects your friendly units. Ultimately, this is the skill. This skill fits perfectly with what the Recon class is trying to do. It's longer distance. It's weak point damage focus, so there's a premium on hitting your headshots, and also increased critical chance, so that you're ultimately doing maximum damage on it. So this underpins all 3 of the variants of the classes as well. So it really is almost a class-defining ability. Now let's take a look at the passives really quickly. Acrobatics, after a dodge roll, you get slightly higher weak point damage and critical chance in your first shot after a dodge roll. So once again, low cooldown dodge roll into a shot. The whole idea is that you're spamming these 2 abilities so that you're getting maximum damage each time. And if a kill is scored, you reduce your dodge roll cooldown. Again, incentivizing you to keep rolling, keep using a low cooldown ability to amplify your damage as you're going through. The next passive is fairly interesting, and one that I don't know how well it'll ever work in a game like Synthetik 2. I mean, this is a much longer range class, so feasibly you can make it work. And so what does it do before I get into the detail of it? By standing still, you start channeling up a power. This power improves your recoil and deviation. It increases your weak point and all damage in general, and it charges up in 3 stages. Now, the third stage takes quite long to implement, and there's a visual indicator, a white circle that goes around your character. But my understanding is that the first 2 charges are also quite significant, and I mean, the first charge I think is within the first half second or quarter of a second. The idea is you stand still, you increase your power, and you take a big shot. Right now, with a class like this, maybe with a couple of sniper rifles at a distance, when you haven't aggroed enemies, this might work. But in the game in general, like in Synthetik 2, where you have to keep moving, you can't, I mean, stutter stepping is really important, stutter shooting is really important. So I don't know how much value you'll get out of channel power, but I guess with a sniper class, you get to amplify damage, at least for 1 shot, which is always great. And then finally, this deflection system ultimately increases your overall ricochet chance. I believe this works well with the eraser, which is, I mean, they talk about, they need to get the naming of different effects consistent. They talk about here about bounce, has a high chance to bounce, and then over here they talk about ricochet chance. I don't know whether that's the exact same thing or not, but it would make sense to me that you want a higher ricochet chance in order to enable the laser ability to bounce around and do more damage. Another really fun part to this, and it's a passive around it, is when the shields are downed, it removes your shield generation delay and lasts... it removes your shield regeneration delay, lasts about 5 seconds. What that means is, when your shields go down, you get an instant recharge of those shields. Now, this class is interesting because it has less health and less shields than any of the other classes. So I believe it's at 2,000 health, 1,000 shields, which is atypical. I think the Grenadier or our Nade Father class has got 3,000 health and 1,200 shields, and I think the Chrono Troopers have got 1,500 shields and 3,000 health. So this is just a nice little piece of survivability that's added to the kit, in addition to kind of the dodge roll. It's 2 really neat abilities that give your class survivability. So that's the base kit. Very fun to play. I mean, before I go on to the next variant, it's really worth mentioning the Patrol Revolver is the starting weapon. Very, very nice starting weapon. I do have a few gripes with it. I do think the bloom on this weapon persists for too long. What do I mean by that? You take a shot, the indicator for where you're going to aim for blooms out quite a bit. So if you were to take a follow-up shot immediately, you would end up missing quite often. And then that bloom comes down over time into a more focused shot area again. I believe that the bloom is a bit too high, and the reset of the bloom is a bit too high. So a lot of the times you'll shoot and then have to wait quite a bit before the bloom gets small enough for you to be able to aim the next shot. But it is a very high damage weapon, very slow shooting, high damage weapon, very fun, and again, just works with the class in general. So let's jump onto the variants. And before we do that, actually, the secondary ability that you unlock at level 10, so you can start with one of 2 passives with the base Recon class. This really looks interesting to me. So this passive, Deletion, affects your Eraser ability, the one where you can apply a laser to your next shot. It increases the maximum charges by 1. It increases the charge recharge time by 150. And then to recharge 4 charges at once. So it puts an immense amount of emphasis on this ability. And I think that's quite fun. That would be quite a fun way to play. Which is slightly different to the Acrobatics one, which is more dodge roll focused. So really looking forward to unlocking this at level 10 and giving it a go. Nice little variation on the main class passive. So let's take a look at Recon Psionic. Very interesting class. I can't wait to give this class a go. So it has a dodge roll, almost exactly the same as the last class, but has an additional effect while you're in the Psi Cloud. So what is the Psi Cloud? Let's start with the Psi Cloud, because this class specialization, the Recon Psionic, is built entirely around the Psi Cloud Grenade. A lot of effects use the Psi Cloud Grenade. A lot of them work off of this ability. So let's really understand what this does. So this creates a Psi Cloud, and if you stand within that Psi Cloud, it increases your dodge chance, grants a chance for no ability cooldowns, and greatly reduces Psi infused shot cooldown. So the idea is you throw this, and then you actively inside it, right? You're inside it, you're moving around it. It's giving you a whole bunch of benefits while you're in there, and other abilities play off of that. So, for example, the dodge roll. Say you're taking a lot of damage, and you need some shields immediately. Well, you can chuck down a Psi Cloud and dodge roll into it. And while you're inside the Psi Cloud, you refresh shields by 500. And it grants you a speed boost. So that's one play off of the Psi Cloud Grenade. The other is down here with this Psi Infused Shot ability. When ready, the next shot is a critical strike. Causes an area slow effect on the hit target. So quite a low cooldown ability. It's a passive that cools down, and then you activate it with a shot. And it works off the Psi Cloud Grenade, right? So this basically increases the cooldown of your Psi Infused Shot and gives you critical strikes quite often. So this is, to me, the way I read critical strike is it's basically 100% crit chance. So big benefits to being in the Psi Cloud. What's Psi Field? That's the third ability. Oh, I think this is the is this the utility? No, it's not. It's not. Anyway, I think this is the utility ability. So the utility is a Psi Field. It creates a psionic field on the ground, slowing and damaging enemies walking through the area. Firing a weapon within deals damage. Would be interesting to see how this works. So this looks like if you were to fire a weapon within, it deals damage, basically meaning that any enemies within that psionic field are dealing damage to themselves as they are walking through it. So I haven't used it. Looks really interesting. Another thing that you need to manage, but it's more focused on the enemy. Very nice variations to the original Recon class with this. I absolutely love this class. So base ability again, as I said when we were looking at the base Recon class, weak point scan is there, very similar. It does exactly the same thing. This is basically the main class ability that sits across all three of the variations of Recon. Having a look at its at the Psionic Recon's main passive. So it says, after using your Psi Grenade, increase item effect power by 100 and lasts 1 second. I absolutely love this. So another effect of the Psi Cloud. You put the Psi Cloud down, you get into, as you put the Psi Cloud down, the next item you use increases its effect power by 100. That is enormously powerful. And I think there'll be some really interesting ways in which you can interact that. So it lasts 1 second, so you have to use it, activate the item quite quickly, which might be a problem in the current iteration, but we'll talk more about the items later and what's planned for the future. But right now, very nice way to get extra effect off of your items if you're able to trigger them within the time that you've used the Psi Cloud Grenade. And then finally, hacking is a passive. You just start with 2 key cards, 500 credits, so just a bit of a boost at the start, and increases your effect power of items by 20% as a base. So I can see if Synthetik 2 ever moves towards something that is more of, let's say, an activatable items, where you can use activatable items. I think this will end up being a very strong build to use once activatable items are in the game. Now, it's not in the current iteration. I'll talk a bit more about what I read from Shrike, which I believe is one of the developers on Reddit, where they're going with items in the game. Right now, it might be difficult to get this effect to work because a lot of the items are triggered rather than activatable. But on hacking, it's just a base effect power of items being increased by 20%. So once we get activatable items, this is going to end up being a very strong class to use, as it provides you these passive bonuses or activated bonuses to the power of your passive items. To the power of your activatable items. Really good. I love how different the Recon classes are. So the base variant compared to the Psionic is a completely different playstyle. I haven't played it yet, but you can just see by the way in which you need to use the different class kit abilities that it'll be a completely different experience. And I absolutely love that. Lots of variation in what you can take into a run. And then finally, there's the anti-material Recon. Again, starts with your base dodge roll, not the kind of the Psi enhanced one of the Psi Recon class, just a base dodge roll, exactly the same as the base Recon class, and it provides you with the dodge chance and the speed boost. And then you have this heavy anti-tank mine, so it places a mine down, it deals anti-material damage. I don't know if anti-material damage is a new type of damage added to the game, or whether it's been there before. It does deal bonus damage against armor, which not too many enemies have, but some of the riot guards, for example, can have quite high armor. And the mine kills reduce the cooldown of the engine shot, which is the next ability. This massively empowers your next shot, gives you massive weak point damage, gives you a small anti-material explosion, and has a chance for a chain reaction. In addition, it stuns the target. So very, very powerful ability on a fairly high cooldown at 15 seconds, or a medium cooldown, 15 seconds. However, it doesn't work on kill shots. So you want to be getting this off to reduce the health of an enemy, but not to apply the kill shot. Again, you have the weak point scan, which is the base of all the Recon classes. Very same ability, just increases your critical hit chance and your weak point damage. And then let's get to the passives. The main passive is perfect timing. You get a bonus after not firing a weapon for 3 seconds. Ideal prepare for an ambush around corners. So essentially an ability that gives you a one-off really big damage boost. I don't know how big the damage boost is, but I'm assuming a once-off large damage boost if you were not to fire for a while, which is quite common as you're running between different groups of enemies. So this will fairly regularly go off on your first shot, which I guess makes you think at what you're targeting the first time up. Then you have defensive measures. Upon dropping on low health, it throws a smoke grenade, heals a small amount of health, and refreshes the dodge roll cooldown. Effectively, a little bit of escapability for this class. And I guess just a way in which you can increase your survivability as you go through your runs. And then finally, on heavy munitions, this is really interesting. You start with an anti-material rifle, which I believe is one of the new rifles added to the game. So would love to see how this works. Passively, it increases damage against armor, reduces your recoil and shield damage, and has a reduced fire rate. Now, this class to me is almost like a one-shot wonder class. Massive, massive damage on single shots. With, I guess, a little bit of difficulty in escaping. So fairly slow play class. Interesting to see how it works. It looks to me like the least flexible of the three classes that came out, but I have not played it. I'll have to play it a bit to understand how it works. Again, another very interesting variation to the class. So it's going to be really good to see how all of this pans out. Also, you would have noticed a couple of things on the UI. We'll talk about this a bit later, but a couple of things that I like they did on the UI. They first of all just changed the positioning of where you'd select your classes to the bottom. It used to be at the top. But now they've added a start game button right in the class menu, which I think is great. There's too many menus in this game. So I said earlier in my early impressions video, I felt like the UI was more form over function. So doing small things like this, where you're just able to reduce the amount of clicks before you start a game, is really nice. So good on you guys for streamlining this a bit. I still think there's a lot of clunkiness in the menus. I still think there's too many menus, both in a run in the game and in the main menu screens. But things like this go a long way to helping out so you don't spend more time in menus than you need to. Okay. So that's taken us through the classes. Let's get back to the patch notes, shall we? So they talked about the 3 new classes. We're not going to go into too much detail. Let's just see how they have explained their classes. The new Recon class is a high damage marksman which focus on weak point hits, accuracy, and positioning. Exactly as we said, weak point and critical hit chance is a big thing on this class. It's a distance fighting class. You don't want to be up close and personal. One thing I did notice with the Recon, it struggles to do immediate damage, right? Between the weapon that it has and the lack of kit abilities that do direct damage, there is risks when you're reloading, right? And because you're starting most times with that revolver pistol, there are many instances where you just need to do a bit more damage, and there's nothing in your kit that can apply that damage, which is why this class is very focused on operating at a distance, and why you have like those survivability abilities like the quick cooldown dodge roll and the shields recharge as well. But completely different playstyle to, for example, the Grenadier, which wants to be up close and personal. Recon Psionic, we talked about this one. Utility-focused infiltrator with psionic effects and item affinity. So, as we've said, a class that almost exclusively focuses on its interactions with its psi grenade. Really interested in playing that one. I can't wait, because it just looks really interesting. And a very different way to play around a specific kit ability. Whereas I think a lot of the other classes are just more, you know, situational abilities. This entire kit is focused around that psi grenade. And finally, anti-material recon, slow but hard-hitting vehicle hunting sniper. Interesting that this is a vehicle hunting sniper. I don't know whether this means that we're going to see more vehicles down the line. I know that there's not that many high armor enemies, if I'm not mistaken. I can only think of a couple of the turrets, the riot guards, a couple of other weapons, maybe a couple of other enemies maybe have it. But I guess as the game expands and there's different types of enemies and factions, when factions come online, I think you might see certain factions have more vehicles, in which case this class with its anti-vehicle mines and kind of like its big hit abilities, big once-off shot abilities, will really shine. So we'll see how it develops. The least interesting, in my humble opinion, of the three new classes or the variants. But I mean, I haven't played it. We've got to see how it operates, and I am sure we'll get a few runs in. Okay, on to enemies. And now, just give me 1 second here. Finding my feet again. So, on enemies, Last Defender is now in the game. Thank you. Thank you, Flow Fire Games, for that. Really, really helpful to have a final boss. So I had, I didn't know this, but the final boss was not yet in the day one patch version of the game. So I had a particularly long Grenadier run, particularly long Nade Father run, and I got all the way to the end. Really excited about facing the final boss, and then I walked into an empty room, and I had to exit the game. So great that the final boss is in. I'm looking forward to seeing how the final boss operates, and looking forward to fighting him. Varied fixes in AI, and I think if we've talked about so far the three biggest changes being more enemies, better flow to the game, better pacing, better character speed. I think this and obviously the Recon class being put in. This is to me kind of the fourth biggest and best change. The AI has been improved quite a bit. And the example I'm going to use here, prior to this patch, some of the larger robotic enemies that you would face would sometimes just sit back and do nothing, would sit in a corner and do nothing. You could actually just empty magazines into them from a distance and they wouldn't even react. Massive change. They've bettered that, and now those larger robotic enemies are engaging with you. It makes, I mean, they're really threatening now. And that's a great change for the game, obviously. You can't have poor AI in a game like this. And I'm looking forward to them continuing to improve the AI as we go through. But for now, a very positive change. It makes the game a lot more challenging when every enemy is doing what it's meant to be doing. Two other changes, and I'm not sure how to read this one. They talk about increased enemy type pool per map by 1. Now, either this means that you have a chance of encountering one more type of enemy per map. Okay, so when it randomly generates the encounters of the map, it'll generate from one extra. It'll include an extra enemy in the pool and might include that enemy in whatever randomized encounters it builds into the map. Or it could mean that the game can pick from a wider pool of enemies per map, right? So either you have more enemies per map, or you end up having a wider pool per map, right? I'm not exactly sure how to interpret this one, and I'm not sure I really explained that one too well, but any variety that they include is going to be good. I'm not going to spend too much time until we've seen it. I'm just expecting that to be just greater enemy variety within a specific map. Increased tower amount per map by 1. So it just means more towers. Towers have got high... it can be quite annoying. They've got very, very high armor. So it's quite hard to take them down. Quite bullet spongy, but they've included more per map, and I guess it's just for the challenge. That's fine. No issues with that. Suicide pineapple drones now have a delay and a sound before exploding. Absolutely fine with that. The pineapple drones were pretty useless in pre-patch. They would kind of just float towards you and have to get quite close before they explode. I don't know how much they've changed. I did fight against them. They didn't feel very different, but there is a change to them. Rework taser bot to shoot a weapon, have a targeting indicator. So this is your little Hoover machines that go around and stun you. Don't know, haven't seen this change much, but I'm assuming it's for the better. Melee Enforcer now has a 1-second iron shield, is generally slower, and no more plating. Hallelujah. Thank you for this change. I'm going to show you guys something. So this is a really big change, and let me first show you what I mean before we dive into the explanation. So I'm going to put up a graphic on screen now that I want you guys to study. So this is one of my runs. It's Grenadier, and you can see over there I encounter a rushing melee enforcer. Now, the biggest threat in this game are the melee enemies. The two biggest threats in this game. Earlier game, it's the melee enemies, like the melee enforcer particularly. The dogs are also melee enemies, but slightly less. They're slightly less threatening because you can actually dodge them by just circling around them. The melee enforcers have a very wide swing arc, so they tend to hit you quite often. So in this video example, I'm running down and I encounter a melee enforcer. Now, look when I start shooting him, and we'll wait for it to loop again. It took quite a long time to kill him, but look at it. Look at this now. I shoot him once, twice. As I shoot him, he has 2 plates on him, right? Which means my first 2 shots deal no damage. The P33 compact didn't have that many bullets in... I mean, what did it have? Like 6 bullets left when I attacked it. I wasted 2 bullets on that. And then he proceeded to wail on me as I switched over to my rocket launcher and finally downed him. Now, they're not going to have plating anymore, which is a really, really good change. Because it's usually fine. And in this case, you can see how close I came to death. Just against this enemy. I mean, I think one more swing and he would have had me. But the biggest problem was when you get 2 or 3 of these guys charging you. And sometimes you just walk into an area. And like I did here, I didn't mean to trigger him, but I did, right? Now, when you get one of these guys running at you doing this much damage, because you have to take out 2 armor plates before you deal damage to him, imagine what it's like with 2. And that was the #1 reason why my runs would end, is melee enforcers. And then in later game, it's the shotgunners. The shotgunners, again, are a little more easy to deal with because you can actually strafe their shotgun bullets. But the melee enforcer's swing arc is so wide that even when you try to walk around him, you end up getting hit. So I have not faced melee enforcers since the patch, but the fact that they slow and have no more plating is going to end up making a really big difference. And I'm all for this change because it was one of the most frustrating ways to die, especially when you're rushed down by 2 of these guys. Now, I know they're going to say, play slower, play tactically. Yeah, I get you. Sometimes you just trigger them, and they can end a run if there's 2 of them running at you with double plating. So, positive change. Enemy riot guards can now shield bash when in melee range, removing shields. This is great. Any roguelite worth its salt has enemies that you have to play around, different abilities on enemies that you have to play around. It's part of the diversity of roguelites, why I love roguelites, and it's my favorite genre of games. It's essentially a condensed RPG. In a single run, you're developing a character, you're running through a game, and it's imperative to have great AI and varied enemies. And the more types of things like this that they include, where each enemy has something that you have to play around, all the better power to them. Please keep doing this. They say more improvements coming. Well, I say keep them coming, Shrike. Loving some of the changes so far. Again, another small change on the face of it. Some missiles can now be shot down. I'm thinking of, well, they give the example of the jet boss, but there's also drones. I'm assuming the drones, the missile drones, you can also end up shooting down their missiles. They were never really all that threatening, but it's always nice to have a different way to deal with them. One thing that I will note that I picked up on playing through the run is that anything that's projectile based now that's shooting at you, like missiles, and I think there's some enemies that shoot like energy orbs at you as well, it's a lot harder to get away from missiles and energy orbs. I think they follow you around a bit more, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe it is more of a significant change now because those things follow you around more. It just gives you another way to get rid of them. And I mean, this is a welcome way to do it. I mean, Jet Boss was interesting because usually he shoots two. It's one of the bosses you can get in the first level, or in the first area that you're in. And what could typically happen, he'd shoot the two rockets at you, and then as you're trying to dodge the rockets, you get barraged by his two Sidewinder machine guns. So I guess a nice way to deal with it. I never found it particularly difficult to dodge them, but I guess let's see how the change works, right? Fixed random faction reroll after each map now happens in the 3rd floor. Don't really know much. I haven't paid much attention to the factions, but I guess it's a change that I can't really comment on at the moment. All right, so what's next? Difficulty. Actually, instead of talking about these here, let's quickly run through them here and then we'll jump into the game and have a look at them. So there's 2 new difficulty levels. There's 2 new difficulty modifiers before you jump into a game. There's a lightning start difficulty modifier and a tactical difficulty modifier. They've also, and we'll talk about those when we get a chance to in the game. Higher difficulty and terror level is now harder. I'm assuming this is the progression. So you can start a game on a higher terror level or a higher difficulty level. I'm assuming they're saying that it is now harder. I don't know. I didn't play the higher difficulty levels in pre-patch. So I guess as we progress further and we make the game harder for ourselves, we'll get to see how this operates. Run and gun is relaxed and no longer reduces XP gain. I think this is wrong, or at least it's not the same as in the tooltip in the game. We'll have a look at that. So I do believe that it still has a EXP reduction, but let's take a look at that. Run and gun now has a deviation malice, just meaning that I think there's greater deviation in run and gun. We'll have a look at that again. Remove slow effects from lightning traps. Don't know much about that. Don't know which lightning traps those are. Homing missiles and mortars are slightly harder. Right, okay, so this is the one I've been talking about. I do feel like missiles, anything that's meant to follow you around the map, actually follows you a bit more. I don't know if they've adjusted the speed as well, but I have noticed that it's harder to dodge missiles or projectile items that tend to float towards you, right? Because I think they track you a bit better and follow you a bit longer. Flinch now has a 1-second cooldown. Again, I don't know whether this is in base difficulty. I do know, and maybe this is a good chance just to jump into the gameplay. Sorry, into the game itself. One moment. I go into the lobby here. So this is the escalation here. So I don't know if the flinch relates to... Ooh, whoops. I don't know if the flinch... Yeah, so if you see here, under Machine Legion, the 1985 difficulty, so this difficulty level, they say that on the enemy side, the shots they fire at you cause flinching on health damage. I don't know if there's any flinching in base version. I certainly don't think so, but I might be wrong on that one. But anyway, I think that relates potentially just to the harder difficulty level. And then let's have a quick look at some of those difficulty modifiers. So, as you can see, Relax doesn't have an experience multiplier or an experience modifier anymore, but it still has an outgame currency multiplier added, which means that just your data, I'm assuming it's your data and anything you take out from a run, like data, for example, would be reduced. So they did say that they removed any of the penalties on run and gun, but I don't see it here, because even while in the main tooltip here, or in the main difficulty selector, it shows a 0, the tooltip is still showing minus 15%. So I don't know if that's just a something they haven't changed on the tooltip, or whether that's still a negative 15 modifier for the experience. This is just improved movement in accuracy and slightly worse deviation, and less reliance on the stop and go, the stutter shooting movement. So anyway, slight changes to those two. And then we come to the two new difficulty modifiers they've added, which is tactical. This essentially just makes the start of the game a little bit harder. So increases all damage, increased weak point damage, reduced weapon deviation, reduces move and recharge speed, and minimal shields. And am I wrong on this one? Is this that it makes it a bit more difficult? No, I think that's lightning start. Sorry guys. Just ignore what I said there. So let's have a look at this one. I actually don't think I reviewed this one properly. So it adds more tactical twist. Tactical twist, guys? Haven't we talked about tactical? Doesn't it add a tactical twist? Come on, Shrike. Don't we want to rename that to tactical? Make it tactical, Shrike. So to me, that just looks like it's increased damage overall, isn't it? Reduces move and recharge speed, minimal shield. So maybe it just forces you to play the game a little bit more methodically. We'll have a look again at what the patch notes say, but I'm imagining that's what it's going for. So maybe not a difficulty modifier, but more just slightly changing the way you'd play the game. And when it says all damage, I'm assuming that that's enemy damage as well. So I think you just need to plan your encounters out a bit more, and the fact that you're slightly slower as well. And then there's lightning start, which actually applies. So this is an actual difficulty increase in addition to the escalation system. So what this does is your enemies have more damage. They have faster speed, faster fire rate, but this decreases by 5% every room. So it's a harder start that eventually is wiped away and then is likely replaced by the generalized scaling of enemies, right, with the terror levels as you go through. But it just makes the start of the game a bit more difficult and rewards you accordingly. So I think this is a pretty nice change. Again, I never played Synthetik 1, but I do know enough to say that the game was all about custom modifiers. And I'm always happy with a game like this that already is giving us so many different ways to start the game, different classes, different specializations and kits to go in with, different variants. It's always nice to have different difficulty modifiers that will actually adapt the way you play, and that's can't wait to see what the modding community does with this long term, because really difficulty modifiers are at the heart of what Synthetik 1 was all about. Okay, so that takes us back to the patch notes. Just read this a little bit quickly. What do they say? So new tactical difficulty modifier. I don't think they say anything else about the tactical difficulty modifier. Okay. So I think that since that doesn't actually give you any sort of additional, or doesn't give you additional experience or a penalty to experience or your outgame currency, I think it's just a different way to play the game. We'll be interested to see how that's different. Okay. So moving on. Onto UI. Weapon stats now all update and show armor, pen, and damage. That's nice. I haven't paid much attention to this, but great that it's added. Damage is based on point blank damage right now. I guess that means that whatever the damage number is, it's whatever the maximum damage would be at point blank range, and without any sort of range modifiers, because obviously there are range modifiers to this game, and there is fall off over range for weapons. Added ammo counter to player when below 25 ammo. This is this is quite nice. I personally think there's lots of ways in which you can see that you're running out of ammo. Already on your cursor, there's the circle where you shoot is almost filled up to the extent that you have ammo, so you can actually see when you're getting quite close to ammo. What this does is actually just adds a counter, so when you're below 25%, you'll see a counter for the amount of ammo you have left, and that's right next to your player. Now, I don't know how useful that is. For me, it's not particularly, because my eyes are never on my player as I'm shooting, so I'm relying on the information I'm getting from the actual cursor itself, which is where I'm aiming. But, I mean, anything that adds and gives you more information is going to be useful. Added ammo display on ammo pickup. So this is really simple. You obviously got your weapons over to the right when you're playing a game. I mean, I can quickly just jump into the melee and plating. So on the right over there, just ignore the video, just check on the right. You can see the amount of bullets, the amount of ammo you have in your weapons going down as I'm shooting. So what this basically has done, it's sorry, let me just transition back to the right thing. What this has basically done is just that when you pick up ammo, it now shows you plus 26 or plus 25 next to the ammo count for the weapon that you've picked up. So if you pick up an ammo box, you'll see like, you know, weapon 1, weapon 2, weapon 3, the ammo count, and it'll show you the plus, the actual amount that was added, whereas before I think it just obviously just added it and you could see it in the total, but now it just gives you a bit more information as to how much ammo you actually picked up. Add an EXP bar in-game, which shows EXP gained after combat ends. That's quite nice. And add a sound for level up. So just a bit of extra UI, a bit more extra information to the player. I'm always for that. UI does need work on this game, so do the menus. And I'm all for giving the player the information they need. Onto the menus, starting with some menu improvements, but ongoing. Yeah, guys, menus need a lot of work. Looking forward to it. I think you're taking the right step, but still plenty of work to do around the menus. Added quick play button to the end screen. This is really nice. So when you die at the end of a game, you don't need to go back all the way through the menu system. There's an immediate quick play button which allows you to jump right into another run, which I think is great. Every single roguelite should have that. Because the whole thing with going on runs, I think that one of the best games to take from this was Risk of Rain. Risk of Rain 2 makes it so seamless to jump into a game. It's instantaneous. There's almost no load screens. You're just in a game right off the bat. I don't like roguelites that force you to build up, like you have to go back to the menu screen, see what you got, yada, 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 and then jump into a new game. It's great they added a quick play button so you can jump right back in, say you have a bad run, jump right back in, and you don't have to go back through the clunky menu system. Very nice, and helps you to avoid the clusterfuck that is the menu system right now in Synthetik 2. Removed multiple layers on the end screen. Again, this is something that I noted. I think the problem with multiple layers on menus is twofold. So on the end screen, it was particularly egregious. So now there's a very clean, simple, single end screen menu. In fact, I don't see why I can't show you guys that very quickly. I'm just going to jump into the game. Take the escalator down. Let's just jump into the game really quickly and we'll just talk about it. So there's two problems with the menus in the game. The most egregious one was in the in-game menu, and we'll show you, but there still is an issue with the in-game menu, and I'm glad that they're improving it. Here's the example that I want to show you. So there's no reason, or at least I don't think there's any reason why there should be 3 different menus for class, upgrades, and weapons. There must be a way in which you can condense that into one screen. The character model doesn't add much to here, so they haven't made any changes there. But if I was to quit the game, I died. Rip me. This is the new exit menu, or this is the new endgame menu, which is really great. Everything's on one screen, right? So over here, I've got all my abilities. Over here, I'm assuming my abilities and my items are going to be here. Over here, I'm going to have all my perks, right? Actually, I think that's perks. That's items. And then, you know, kills, damage, accuracy, what weapons I had, XP, and obviously if I earn any data or unlock tokens that appear there. And there's the restart button, which is really great. The more you can avoid having to go through menus in this game and jump right back into the action, especially now, as I've said, the speed and flow of the game is better. I think I'm all for that. So let's get back in, and what we can actually do here, get back onto the main patch notes screen. So if you give me a second, let me manage back to that on my own screens. Right. So that's the menu. We're getting up to the hour mark here, so I'm going to run through the rest a little bit faster. New items, Helsing Powerball. I haven't gotten it. I like this change. DMR Sentry Turret now spawns on utility ability. So I'm not a big fan of the DMR Sentry Turrets in general. I think it's a pretty weak item. But now, at least you can place it down, or you can control when it appears. What happened in pre-patch was that it would trigger on its own. So you'd just be running around and randomly you'd shoot out a DMR sentry turret in a random location, like when you run into an enemy, which I thought was just really clunky and useless. Now at least it works off of a utility ability. So, and since utility is not something you use nearly as often as some of your other abilities, or at least I don't, it's a nice way to bring more use to both the utility ability and this item, in that you can use the ability to activate and place the item where you want, which makes it a heck of a lot more useful. Very small tweaks, great. And a solution for activating abilities is coming in the next 1 to 2 patches. Right, let's talk about that really quickly. So I had a look over at Reddit, and Shrike put up this post. So there's been a lot of complaints around the community that the items in this game are either randomly triggered, or, you know, triggered by some sort of an event, and sometimes that event is not in your control. So there's a couple of ways you can trigger something. So say that, take the taser for example. If someone runs up to you, the taser will automatically activate. Now you don't have control, but it is a scenario where you use the taser, right? So that's fine working that way. It's triggered by an enemy coming close to you. And some of the other items were triggered, or could be triggered, by using your class abilities. So you'd have control over it, but it's almost quasi-control, because you'd have to use an adjacent ability to be able to activate the item. Now, there's been a lot of feedback on that, and people have been asking for something, I believe, which is closer to Synthetik 1, where you could activate items yourself. So you have an item and you activate it by hotkey. So directly activatable, targetable items, right? So they're thinking of implementing a new system. So I'll read this out. I just got a good idea. Maybe all items that use on ability usage type can be changed to do 2 boost slots by a toggle in the item menu. Maybe with the settings for the first 2 such items always get auto-assigned. That way you can keep inventory management away and keep a good user experience. It does not devolve in a random amount of buttons. So the first on X usage item, you get hotkeys 5 and second 6. And you can unassign it by clicking simply. The first slot is getting 20% boost and the second 10% boost. So basically, you get 2 item slots. And you get 2 hotkeys for those item slots. You can place them into those slots, and you can activate the items yourself. With the 2 items you hold there, you can activate yourself, and they get a boost while you're doing it. Nice change. Adds to the complexity and the depth of the game, because you have to remember more hotkeys. I do understand that they're trying to keep away from having too many buttons to remember, because it can get quite hectic if you're thinking about 5, 6. So you're thinking about 4 kit abilities and 5 or 6 items. That can be really difficult to track. But I think this is a nice middle ground, and one that I'm looking forward to. So when Shrike talks about, or when they talk about in the patch notes, a solution for activating abilities is coming in the next 1-2 patches, I'm assuming this is what they're talking about. Very much looking forward to that, because I do think that adding items in the game that you can activate yourself, and that you can kind of place onto a hotbar for kind of utility items 5 and 6, just adds depth to the game. It gives you more control over your build. It gives you more agency, more decision making you have to make. And that is really at the core of what makes roguelites and roguelites so special, is it's the build diversity, player agency, and the variety you get, the different experience you get on every single run. So all for that change. Looking forward to it, Shrike. Can't wait to see what you guys do in the next couple of weeks. All right, on weapons, new attachment, hair trigger, switches to semi-auto. Have not seen this, but we'll definitely pick it up once I get a chance to. Weapons now properly gain their own ammo value pickup values. This means that ammo economy has changed significantly. Let us know how you feel about certain weapons. So I'm assuming what this means, and I need to look out for it because I haven't observed it while I was playing, but maybe every weapon now, when you pick up an ammo crate, it has a preset amount of ammo that weapon gets, and this might impact one of my previous criticisms, in that the reload system in this game means that if you are to reload a half-empty clip or half-full clip, you lose the rest of the ammo in that clip. But that penalty is not great enough because ammo is just too plentiful. So if they are trying to manage this by every weapon having its own ammo pickup value, like say, it's this thing, the Battle Hymn, which is a shotgun that is a rapid fire burst of I think 5 shots, you could manage the amount of ammo that the player has by significantly reducing the amount of ammo they can pick up out of an ammo box for that, or out of an ammo, I guess, drop from an enemy. And in that way, they can make reloading with half-full clips a lot more punishing, which I think would be a good way to go, because right now there's, I mean, whilst there is a penalty to reloading a clip that's full, you really don't feel it. Not even for some of the bigger weapons, because ammo is just way too plentiful. So looking forward to seeing if this changes some dynamics, makes players think about reloading a bit more often. That, again, would be a great change. Fixed pistols requiring much less upgrade parts than other starters. This was a funny one. You were often able to upgrade your pistols like to level 3 or 4 within the first room, because I think it was 50 parts required per upgrade, and I think you'd end up quite easily with 200 weapon upgrade parts by the end of the first room, maybe even the second, and that just felt like it was a bit too fast. Your starting pistols can be very powerful. I use the starting pistol almost throughout the game because I conserve ammo for some reason. You don't really need to, but I do that, and I just felt you could get that starting pistol way too powerful, way too quickly. So now it's 125 parts instead of 50. It means that upgrading it is a bit slower. Also means that when you make a pistol upgrade, you're committing to the pistol, as you could have used that upgrade on another much higher powered weapon like a Battle Hymn or another legendary weapon. So makes you think a bit more, and it's not an auto upgrade like it used to be in the past. Many attachments have been fixed. That's great. Really great. Now, I've got a bit of a request here from Flowfire. It would be really useful, guys, if you could give us a list of attachments and items that are not currently working, or elements of them that are not working. That goes for shop upgrades as well. Some of the upgrades for abilities, some of the upgrades for items, I have absolutely no idea whether they work. And it wouldn't be nice just to have a known issues list where you list out things that you know don't work, so that when we're playing through the game, I'm not just throwing away an upgrade for no reason. I understand this is EA, but I mean, I can imagine you having a list like that on hand would be quite useful for everyone, and just mean that EA is more enjoyable for all of your player base. So, new uncommon special weapon, heavy flak cannon. Haven't seen it. And then the new epic marksman rifle, the anti-material. So that's the anti-material recon class. What was it? Anti-material recon class. That's the starting weapon that you get as part of the kit. So looking forward to playing with that. Finally, on heat, this is an interesting one, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So they added rudimentary first version of an always visible heat bar. Many weapons have increased heat, but there might have been some non-optimal tweaks. Let us know which ones you want to see change. Added heat sound when reaching high heat levels on shooting. So let me show you what this looks like. I have got a very short clip of this one. So in this clip, I'm fighting I think it's the first area boss. And you can see I'm using the industrial breaching cutter. If you look to the gun on the bottom right, this clip's on loop, a very short loop, by the way. If you look at the gun on the bottom right, you can see as I'm shooting that industrial breaching cutter, you can see the heat build up on the left-hand side. So I like this. I don't know if heat was implemented before. I didn't see it. Maybe it was a hidden mechanic, but now having that visible is great. And as I said, now with the new change to the magazine ejection, I'm really keen to see how and whether there's any incentive to ejecting a magazine and not reloading, just so you can get the heat levels down. But yeah, it's a rudimentary system, but it works. It's great to have it down there. It's another thing for the player to manage. And looking forward to see if that's on every weapon and not just on a couple of them, because there's a lot of There's a lot of weapon attachments that increase heat that I haven't seen the impacts of. So maybe I'll do a couple of runs with pistols where I take some of the high heat options and we see if that ends up impacting the weapon in any sort of way. Okay. So moving on to other class changes. The Chrono TP has a reduced blur effect. I wasn't particularly aware of this one. Chrono breaching charges reach 2 meters further. This is a really good change for the Chrono Trooper class. And I say this because of the classes, I feel like the Chrono Trooper is the one with the most incongruent kit. And by that I mean that I think a lot of his abilities are fairly useless. The blink is so powerful, so I understand why you have to try and balance around the blink ability, because it's great to be able to get away from enemies. It's one of the most easiest classes to get away from trouble because of the double blink. But everything else in that kit is very underwhelming. I mean, let's just take a really quick look at that. You just jump into the game. Let me just jump into the game quickly. So we go back and we get the Chrono Trooper class. So Chrono Blink, super powerful. We said that. Chrono Charge. So what they've done now is they've increased the range of the Chrono Charge by 2 meters. Now, again, I've said this class has got incongruent skills because it feels like it should be a range class that works with its evasiveness, its ability to get away. Yet something like Chrono Charge, which triggers an explosion around your character, is begging for you to jump into the action. And I just don't think this class is meant to be doing that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not playing him right. But his kit feels very incongruent. So any sort of a buff, like to something like Chrono Charge, where it's a slightly bigger range around your character, I think that's useful. Because then you don't have to be quite as close into the battle. Danger Overdrive is another interesting one. As I said, so this class just feels a little bit incongruent to me, ultimately. Maybe it is meant to be a class that's played up close, but I found Danger Overdrive way too risky to use, and Shield Dome way too underwhelming, in that when you're running away from enemies, if you're going to try to get your shields back up, you don't want to be limited to a certain area. So anyway, any changes to Chrono is good, because I don't know, I don't see the congruency of the class, and the skills don't flow. There's no natural progression of skill usage when you're entering encounters with Chrono, which I think is a pity. And I'd like to see the class maybe slightly reworked. Maybe the specializations are slightly different, but for now, at least for me, a bit underwhelming, but happy to see a change on Chrono. As I do think his abilities are a bit underwhelming. As mentioned, Chrono Striker, Trooper, Grenadier, Assault Grenadier, slight speed increase. Okay, great. We talked about this already. Speed, violence, momentum is the watchword for this patch. It's great that all the classes are getting a speed increase. It just makes the game flow a lot better. So audio, I'm not going to spend too much time on. Just changing of some audio tracks. They also changed the weaker of the 2 headshot sounds to be more powerful. Nothing too exciting over there. Around fixes, they say fixed a ton of actions that did not work fully. Shrines, attachments, perks. Again, guys, it'd be really useful if you would provide a list of items, shrines, attachments, perks that don't work, just so we know as we're playing as players, so we know as we're playing through EA, what actually isn't working, right? Because you might be putting bug reports through for something that you just haven't, you've put in the game, but you haven't put an ability against. It just makes everyone's life easier to know that, so we can avoid that item and you can avoid getting bug reports for it. So would be useful. By list or in-game somewhere, provide us with a list of that. Let us know if you see anything that still does not have their effects. Fine. Performance, notice the improved single core performance and varied improvements. I haven't seen much of a performance impact. I played the game quite smoothly. There was a massive issue with the game performance-wise on day one. Post day one patch fixed most of it for me. If anyone else is experiencing issues, I hope the performance updates here have fixed it for you. I'm not going to spend any time on Universe Edit, as I'm sure there's a lot of changes there. I've not used it. It's great to see that the modding community is already producing really impressive mods. Can't wait to try some of those out. But yeah, I'm not going to spend time on the Universe Edit or modding changes. Now, onto known issues. So we'll finish off this video, and I do realize it's quite long, but let's finish off known issues with a look through known issues and some things that I still think could change following my very limited play of the Intel or Update 1. So they talk about Chrono Riot Shields having a strange stun. Now, I actually managed to capture this, and I'm going to put it up on screen for a moment. So you can see here I'm playing with the Recon class. I get hit here and stunned. I'm assuming this is what they're talking about with the Chrono Riot Shields. But this happened quite often. Very annoyingly. And I don't know if it's a bug. It appears to be a bug. But it just looks like... I don't know where the ability triggers from, right? So if you look at him shooting at me, he doesn't hit me. And I get stunned when I'm within a certain range, and then he gets a couple of shots off on me. So I'm assuming that's what the bug is. Just be careful of the Chrono Shields until then. Try not to stand still, keep your distance, and shoot at them from a distance. But that's what I managed to pick up from, and that's what I think they're talking about over there. Some perks do not work. Eraser, defensive measures. Right, okay. Thanks for telling us. Eraser doesn't work. That's interesting. Huh, okay. Key bindings sometimes do not save. Well, for me, I think I've griped about this, or I've bemoaned this almost every run I've done. So every time I restart the game, I have to rebind my ability keys because I tend to use my mouse for that. Would be good to get that fixed. Enemy bullet speed is faster than it should be. Fine. If you made a modded weapon due to ammo pickup fix, the ammo pickup is reset to 0 and needs fixing. Okay, gotcha. This is down to modding. Keep in mind this is early access, and we cannot do this level of huge amounts of changes and have the same amount of polish each patch as a fully released game, with far less output and months-long wait cycles, so some things will break or become worse than before. Guys, that is a really long sentence. I think what you're just trying to say there is that you can't expect to have this amount of changes without any bugs, but if bugs are there, you'll fix them. Fine, understand that. And very appreciative of the changes from the Flow Fire team. I think this patch has been absolutely amazing. Thank you. I'm enjoying the game a heck of a ton. I'm sure as more people discover this game, they'll enjoy it. And I, for one, am really looking forward to growing and playing this game in the foreseeable future. All right. So that's the end of the patch notes. Another interesting thing is they're releasing the roadmap. So we might have a look at that on Monday. What are they planning for the future? Would love to see what they've got coming down the line. So we'll have a look at that when that comes through. And then I think let's just finish off with a couple of my thoughts, some things that I think that they can still change. So overall, love the update. Indeed, this is the violence, speed, and momentum patch. The flow of the game is a lot better. It feels a lot snappier. It feels a lot faster. It's exactly where Synthetik 2 needs to be at the moment. I'm sure there'll be some tweaking back and forth between that, but it is right at that cusp of being nice and crisp, but not a run-and-gun shooter, which is exactly what you're trying to avoid with this type of a game. Very early thoughts on the Patrol Revolver. I think it has a little bit too much bloom. I mentioned that a bit earlier. It would be nice to see that weapon's bloom reduced slightly, because it does feel like a little bit of a chore to use, and it's especially difficult because it's got a very low magazine capacity and at the same time very high bloom. So especially when you start being swamped by, say, for example, dogs or melee characters, it's very hard to get out of that scenario when you're being rushed down by melee attackers with a weapon like that, because it's not accurate and it's got a low magazine. So just reduce the bloom, or like the bloom reset, deviation reset, I don't know what you guys call it. And I think that'd be much obliged. As I said before, from my end, key bindings, please fix those. That would be great to get those fixed. It's good that you guys are aware of that. And really, the biggest ask from me, as someone that's going to play your game quite a bit, and I'm sure many other people in the community, is going to be to give us a full list of known issues on items, upgrades, shop purchases, abilities, just so that we know what we can avoid. Especially when it's something that you haven't put an ability against. It just saves us the effort of putting through a bug report, and it saves you having to sift through stuff where people are giving you bug reports for something you haven't put in. A list somewhere on Reddit, on your Discord, would be really useful. All right, so that's pretty much it, and that's gotten me through what is a much longer patch review video than I thought I would make. I cannot believe that we're pushing up to an hour and 15 minutes. But I guess there was a lot to talk about. I think I'm about in that place right now where I can slightly change my early impressions recommendation. I said at the start that I wouldn't recommend this game to players because I think that it's... I still think it needs a few months in the oven, I said during the early impressions video. But I've got to say, with some of these changes and some of the stuff that we're seeing, both from the great support from the mod community, which continues to come out with great new characters and modifiers, and at the same time, them adding the Recon class, I really think that I'm in a position where I can say you should go out and get this game now. It's going to have a lot of changes going through, but there's so much replayability. There's a great modding community, and this game's just going to get better, and it's... guess what? It's already fucking great. So, a big thanks to the Flow Fire team. Great patch. And I'm looking forward to playing the game for the foreseeable future. So, let me not risk making this video any longer. This has been Flash Hazardous. I hope you enjoyed our very first patch review video. If you liked the content, please leave a like. Please subscribe. If you don't like the content, leave a downvote. I do ask you, please throw some challenges, some comments my way. What can I do better? What do you want to see more of? What should I play through next? Throw out some comments there, guys. And looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Goodbye now.